I want to take you through a brief history of my work with center to edge aiming. My work with center to edge aiming spans back not quite a decade, but the better part of a decade. And I think that as I share this overview of my work with CTE, that can help you in some way with your study of center to edge aiming and your use of CTE during your play. Early on, when I worked with center to edge aiming, I knew that there was a pivot as a part of the technique. And what I would do was, very simply, I would line up the pure center of the cue ball to the exact outside edge of the cue ball as if I'm looking at a half ball alignment. I did that for every single shot. Well, there's a lot of shots on the table, and the way I dealt with them was, on some shots, I would come in and pivot from the outside to center. Other shots, I would come into the inside and pivot from the inside to center. Well, I made a lot of balls that way. But I also missed a lot of balls, because that two-dimensional type alignment is repeatable visually, but it creates inconsistencies in the pivot part of center to edge aiming. So some balls I would make inexplicably, and then other balls I would probably feel my way into making those shots, and I knew that was occurring. There was also something else that bothered me during those early days with my study of CTE, and that was the manual pivot. The manual pivot was very odd. That was the first word that Hal told me. He said, "This is odd. It's going to be very odd." He even said, "I doubt that you'll catch on to it because it's so odd." He told me that. Well, it did bother me because it was so odd, but what bothered me even more was the fact that I would look at professional players play and I would not see a single one of them coming from the inside or from the outside into center cue ball in the manner that I was using as I was working with this. So, but I was intrigued enough with CTE at that point that I wanted to continue my work and my study, because I felt like there was really something to it. So we're, a couple, 2 or 3 years down the road now, and the next big step or awareness that I had was that I had gradually shifted from a pure center to edge alignment to an alignment that was occurring from slightly inside of the center of the cue ball to the edge of the object ball. So I had a perception of center to edge, but I was not purely on that 30-degree type alignment. Same thing for the outside. Some of my visual alignments came from the outside of center cue ball in such a way that I could perceive center to edge from there. So I shifted away from that pure center to edge alignment to an offset. Hal, who will confirm to me that I was on the right track. One night he asked me to get a cue ball. He took the cue ball, he put it up to his nose like this and said, "If you're aiming, lining up with center to edge in this manner, you're not going to have very much luck." So I knew that the offset was proper, but therein lied a problem. How much offset does one use in order to be properly aligned up for a center to edge perception? Well, my early manuals will bear me out that I would teach line up a little bit thicker on this cue ball object ball relationship, or line up a little thinner on this cue ball object ball relationship. Well, that worked, and the balls fell more frequently, and the center pocket aspect of it was more apparent. But there was this problem of how much offset. Now, the idea of having this manual pivot that was sort of odd and weird caused me to eventually just start weaning away from it. I wanted to have a more natural movement into center cue ball. Well, what I did was I would go to my offset and I would just turn my cue all the way to the shot line, eliminating the need for the manual pivot. That was an inside movement. Then for the outside movements, I would take my cue all the way to the outside edge of the cue ball, for example, at times, and turn it into center. And then I would shoot, and I had good success making the balls. Continued success with accuracy, but I still couldn't explain that offset. That offset problem was still there. So, but what bothered me about that technique most of all was the fact that when I watched pros play, I could not see any of the pros bringing their cue in from the outside to center, but I could see plenty of them coming from the inside to center. Well, that's when I totally realized and understood that CTE truly is a visually driven system. Yes, the pivot is part of CTE, and it's an important part, but CTE is primarily a visual system. The pivot is secondary, but it's an important cog in the wheel. Now, so you could observe professional players doing these inside and outside sweeps, which meant that they're lining up not behind the center of the cue ball, but they're lining up just to the inside of center or just to the outside of center. And then they're sweeping in to center cue ball, which is one reason that it can be said that pros are using a form of center to edge aiming. Perhaps they can't explain it, but you could make an argument that they're using center to edge aiming, and I'm not going to go into that here because that is another story. But as far as the offset, that was the key that I had a lot of difficulty in unlocking. So I'm continuing my work, I'm continuing my study, and I'm constantly trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together day by day by day. And the major piece that allowed me to unravel center to edge aiming was Howhill's document. So as I look back on CTE aiming, there's three major pieces of the puzzle. You've got center to edge perception, you've got a slight rotation into center cue ball, which can be referred to as a pivot, and then you have Howhill's three-angle document, which many thought was a representation of the quarter system in some manner, and many thought it was a poor representation of the quarter system, and I was among those that thought that. But when you look at this document in conjunction with a center to edge perception and a pivot, then you're in business. So the first night that I actually looked at the document, and my mind was such that what would happen if I aimed the edge of the cue ball to one of the aim points on the object ball, which is described in his document, and then combine that with the offset of center to edge and throw a pivot in there? Could it possibly work? I came out here, and the first thing that I did, I lined up the left edge of the cue ball to the left aim point on the object ball with a center to edge perception. Well, everything looked good. I went straight into a fixed cue ball. I understood what that was. I did a half tip pivot, very first shot, turned to center, and made the ball cleanly. Then I moved the cue ball so that I had a thicker shot. I looked at the same perception again. Left edge of the cue ball to the left aim point with the center to edge perception. I went into the fixed cue ball to the outside, turned to center, bingo. The ball went right into the hole, split the pocket. Well, I'm starting to really get cold chills, and I'm getting excited at this point. So I had one more test, at least at this point, that I wanted to do. I moved the ball down a little bit thinner to where I knew that the left aim point was not going to work. You see, I've been working on CTE and Pro 1 and this and that for a few years. So once I started getting the puzzle into place, this just fell right in. So now I'm looking at the edge of the cue ball to the center point, to the center aim point on the object ball with a CTE perception. And I went straight into the fixed cue ball, turned to center, stroked right down center cue ball, and made the ball. And then I verified all three of those shots with a Pro 1 sweep. An inside, and then an outside, and then an inside. So at that point, I went in and told Connie, I said, I just figured out center to edge aiming. Now when I say figured it out, now I can explain it objectively. The key is that there is not one line to center to edge aiming, there's two lines. You've got the center to edge perception, then you have the edge of the cue ball to one of the aim points. That's for the CTE perceptions. So that was my first major step forward that prompted me to do DVD-1. DVD-1 quickly followed. Then it was sometime after that I continued my study with the document, and then I realized that the geometry of the table tied directly into my A, B, and C that I put forth on the first DVD. Well, the A in CTE represents a 15-degree perception. The edge to B with center to edge is the 30-degree perception, and then you have the one-line perception for the thinner hit, that's major, and that's the 45-degree perception. There's also a 60-degree perception. But in the document, there's the 90-degree angle, there's the 45-degree line here, the 30-degree line here, the 15-degree line here. This system only works as prescribed on a 2x1 table. If you change the dimensions of the table, move the pockets around, it's not going to work. If you change the perceptions and try to sort of do some in-betweeners, it's not going to work. So the system is finite. It's complete. But as I continue to work with the system, I continue to have deeper understandings, insights, and little discoveries about, application of the system during play. And that's why I share these things with you. So we're drawing to an end here for this part 1 video. Part 2 will be out shortly. So hope you enjoy this. Thank you very much.